Hi, I'm Patrick from Team 2, and we're going to be discussing democratic and authoritarian views on education. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons. Ashley is going to discuss authoritarian with sort of a neutral stance on it, talking about the positives and the negatives. Sandra is going to discuss the democratic approach to education with a positive light on it. Drea will discuss a balanced view, but specifically a emphasis on special education. So authoritarian education is sort of like the top-down approach, like being in charge and having command of the classroom with little or no input from the children. It's sort of what you imagine when you think of the lower grade levels. Some of the positives are that you have definite control over the classroom, in theory, and students obey and listen to what you say, and you can ensure that you have the attention of the students. Some of the negatives are students feel like they have little power or input on the say of what they learn. They may lose motivation since they're not learning things that they're specifically interested in. And it sort of dehumanizes the approach to education, which I think is what we're trying to get away from currently. The democratic approach enforces connections with students and the teacher. It creates an environment where there's more motivation to learn and communication is open. However, sometimes this can result in things sort of getting chaotic and drifting away from the maintained goal, which has a specific problem when you talk about No Child Left Behind and issues like that, where testing is more of an emphasis as opposed to open education.
Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm going to be talking about the neutral and positive aspects and the negative aspects of authoritarian. In most schooling, people see it as that the teacher's just involved alone and the kids have no source of input, but the biggest problem comes within behavioral learning, that where if the students aren't in control and also the teacher has massive control, either classroom can go in different ways. For example, I've done a lot of work in preschool and older elementary education. In the preschool education, kids need a lot of focus and learning how to be behavioral, such as listening and being attentive and having direction in the classroom. Whereas when there's none, kids tend to go chaotic and don't really know what's being asked of them. So implementing definitely different signals, such as shh, be quiet, or having them please sit down and doing different hand signals usually works for teachers. In the other aspect, it can be really a hard lesson for kids to learn. When a teacher uses a harsh tone or rude words and only not letting kids speak up, learning becomes definitely not a beneficial experience, and they're not really wanting to go. And whereas when a teacher has no control, the students tend to want to do what they have to do or want to do.
What do you consider, or how do you consider it to be appropriate for a teacher to create a behavioral program for students who are misbehaving?
I think one, it kind of considers what the student, how they're misbehaving, and as well what actions need to be taken place. Like for example, like in one of our readings, it kind of talked about, do you find it acceptable to take a kid outside and talk to them about their misbehaving? I think that you have to take different steps of actions, which could be hard for an authoritarian teacher because they want to be in charge due to their strong personality. So in a way, it would be, like having those signs, knowing am I being too loud, am I being too quiet, what is these things that they need to implement in the first stages of schooling. And then after, I don't think it's acceptable to take a student out unless it's been a continuous action, because sometimes the students will feel embarrassed in front of all the other students, and then their peers know, they're a really bad student, what am I supposed to, we shouldn't be around him, and then it causes that student to act up. So it's taking the course of actions.
My name is Sandra Hernandez, and I will be discussing about the positive effects about democratic education. First of all, what is democratic education? Well, it consists of learning theory, and school governance where students and staff are equal in status, freedom, and decision making. I believe that democratic education is the way that students connect to real life experiences. It allows students to gain confidence and trust. It enhances their communication skills as well as it allows students to develop their creative thinking skills. And according to the reading titled Freedom, the Child, the Teacher, A Gap Between Ideas and Actions by John Roberts, um, democratic leadership, the distribution of leadership functions throughout the classroom was more effective in ways than authoritarian leadership, particularly in the area of morale and continued ability to work on the task when the teacher was not in the room. Meaning that the democratic education program students feel free to learn and enjoy learning new things and are more confident to completing tasks on their own, even while the teacher is out of the room. On the contrary, authoritarian practices can affect students' learning negatively, which can change the interest in learning. Um, According to the reading titled Democratic Education by Bell Hooks, by undermining education as a practice of freedom, authoritarianism in the classroom dehumanizes and thus shuts down the magic that is always present when individuals are leaders, active learners. It takes the fun out of study and makes it repressive and oppressive. Um, Meaning that authoritarian practices, students become less motivated to learn and end up shutting down. For example, my son, who is in fifth grade, has always enjoyed reading, but this year he has been forced to read only books that were accepted by his teacher. So he is losing that pleasure of reading. In other words, I believe that up, as he grows up, he will associate reading only to schoolwork and not as means of learning for one's own pleasure. Also, democratic education values the importance of communication or speaking freely your thoughts and ideas because this allows students to bring out the creative thinking skills. Um, According to Hooks, conversation is the central um, pedagogy for the democratic educator, talking, taking, talking to share information, to exchange ideas, practice of both inside and outside academic settings that affirms to listeners that learning can take place in a varied time frames and that knowledge can be shared in diverse modes of speech. Meaning that when children are allowed to have discussions, they learn from each other and create community based classrooms where everyone feels free to discuss issues that and learns to respect others others' differences. Therefore, I truly believe that through democratic education, we can change the way children view education and help them gain the true meaning of learning for one's own purpose of insight and enjoyment. Thank you.
A student with no motivation due to so much freedom in the classroom?
First of all, we have to find their interest, their main interest. If they're interested in whatever it is, like some kids are very active, and sometimes it's important to bring out, to combine the study with whatever they like. Like let's say they like running outside or they're all at least playing. Try to incorporate a little bit of what they like to the study, and sometimes that helps. Like, for example, one time there was a very active student who just kept, in kindergarten, who kept going, getting up when they were doing circle. So what the teacher did is she gave him these glasses, and he would, use them to sit down and like observe, because he wanted to be the show of the class. So that was a way for him to get the attention that he was asking for. And then also she would allow him to, participate in, she would tell him to come up in front of the class and help her around. So in a way, he was being part of it, but he was also he was participating, but he was also doing, he was being allowed to be a little bit free and active in circle time.
Yeah, since most students who don't have that natural, oh, I can just sit down, they're allowed to be more outgoing.
Yes, and in that way, he didn't just have to sit down and observe the whole 30 minutes. He was able to stand up and participate in other ways.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'll be giving my both views on authoritative and democratic teaching methods as it relates to special education. So my views within the realm of special education are that authoritative teaching methods are absolutely not very effective. Kids with special needs have different ways of communicating, and so that you have to change the way that you would communicate, let's say, a negative behavior. So we do positive reinforcement. Sometimes, which I don't really like, is a food reward. Sometimes in the classroom we have like some Skittles or something like that. So if they have a preferred behavior, they get a Skittle. Not all the time, but it can work to deviate from certain behaviors within the classroom. So that's more, I would say that's more of a democratic way teaching method. Some of our kids, we have to be authoritative only if they're going to become a danger to others or themselves. That's probably the only time that we are authoritative. We really, really try to stick to the democratic approach because it's the most successful, and it doesn't shame them. I feel like with the regular population of school-age children, when you send a child outside or you make them seem like they're the bad kid in the class, it really shines a spotlight on them in a negative way in front of their peers, and I don't think that that's the best approach as far as what I've seen. So we really, really try in special education to really do positive reinforcement. During our group time, if there's a child that's really, really just amped up, we really try to let them be a part of the group time, maybe help with certain activities within the group time, like holding the pointer at the calendar, or acting out one of our social tips of the day. That's what we do in our classroom. So special education, we really, really try to stay away from the authoritative approach and stick with the democratic.